afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Wolf Woods. We're down here with our Mexican wolves today. We're going to tell you a little bit about them, introduce you to our three boys, and answer your questions if we can. So, gotcha. So our three Mexican wolves here, they're 2 years old, just turned 2 last month. They were born at a facility in New Mexico, and they're potentially releasable animals. They came here just as a place to stay for now. So they're pretty new to us. We got them back in November. Let's see if I can tell you who's who while she's showing them to you. They're a little dirty right now because, as you know, it's been raining tons, and their exhibit, the grass hasn't started growing yet, so they tend to get pretty muddy when they wander around. That's Bruce you're looking at the moment. He's actually in the middle of the pack as far as the social hierarchy goes. He's down there with his other brother, Waya, who is the low man on the totem pole. Waya's the one walking away right now. And then Shadow, the dominant male, he's up at the top along the fence line. And Tanya, one of our other keepers, just threw in some oxtails for them, so we'll see if they go over and get those. They're probably going to wait until she walks away, though, because keepers can be scary sometimes. I don't know why they think we're intimidating. Mexican wolves, they're the smallest subspecies of the gray wolf, although our three boys are actually on the big end as far as Mexican wolves go. Usually Mexican wolves will run around 60 or 70 pounds, but Shadow and Bruce both weigh about 97 pounds right now, and Waya is 80 pounds. So they're big boys for Mexican wolves. Now, if you have any questions all through this, just go ahead and send them in, and we'll answer them as we go. Mexican wolves, they're sort of, they're sort of a success story. They were considered almost completely extinct in the wild. They were exterminated by ranchers and government agents. The biggest problem they have out west, and they're from the southwest U.S. and northern Mexico, is their historical range. Excuse me again. But obviously, when ranchers started moving out west back in the 1800s, then wolves found that they could get easier prey with cattle, so they started killing cattle, and so as a result, they got exterminated almost to the point of extinction in the wild. They were listed as endangered in 1976, and they started a captive breeding program with the wolves in the 90s and started re-releasing them back into the wild. And there we go, somebody's got his oxtail. Shadow's gonna get his snack. And he's a little wary now, wondering why we're watching. But they have been re-releasing wolves into the wild since the 90s, and the census as of the end of last year is that there's roughly 163 of them in the wild, and almost 100 of them are radio collared, so they can monitor them that way. They'll do flyovers and monitor them with the radio tracking collars as well. And then as the wolves reproduce, they've been reproducing at about a rate of 10 to 12% per year. Their population has been increasing, so that's been good news for them. Do we have any questions?
Calvin wants to know what their favorite food is.
Their favorite food, actually, it's just a snack. It's not a daily food, but occasionally they'll get whole rabbits to eat, and they absolutely love those more than anything. Their daily diet is just, they get a ground meat product and then a special sort of dry kibble that's made specially for zoo animals. And that's mainly what they get on a daily basis. And then obviously they'll also get things like bones and oxtails, and then rabbits. We'll give them quail as well to eat.
Jacob wants to know, how big are their teeth and are they sharp?
Well, I haven't ever been close enough to measure their teeth, so I can't really say how big they are. But yes, they're very sharp. Wolves are the top predator. They're at the top of their food chain out in the wild. And since they are predators and meat eaters, they need really good sharp teeth to catch their prey. In the wild, they'll eat a big variety. They'll eat anything from elk and deer, even down to like little voles and rabbits and mice if they can catch them. So they'll pretty much get whatever they can, they'll eat whatever they can get.
Everly wants to know how you can tell them apart.
Well, that's a good question. Right now, I'll admit it's a little hard because they're all so muddy that they look very similar. But Bruce, who's just walking up the middle now, I think that's who you're looking at. Yeah, he's the darkest of the three. In the end of his tail, he's got more black, like a longer black area than the others. Shadow is very similar to Bruce in darkness, but he's got more whiter eyebrows. And then Waya, who you probably are not going to see much of today, he's the smallest, even though it's hard to judge sometimes, and he's a bit lighter in color just overall. And other than physically, just with their behavior is sort of a way to tell them apart too. You know, if somebody's kind of hanging out down at the bottom of the exhibit, sort of being shy and hiding, that's probably Waya.
Olivia wants to know, are they friendly to the keepers?
They are not friendly. They're not unfriendly. They're wary of us. We can go in the yard with them, you know, just to clean and take care of things. We don't have to, you know, shut them away from us, and they'll just stay on the opposite side of the exhibit from where we are. So wolves, they've got this reputation of being big and tough and, you know, ferocious, but they can be more shy, and they just really want to stay away from trouble. So it's not like out in the wild, if you come across a wolf, they're going to come and attack you. And these guys, they're not going to come and get us when we're in there with them. They'll just stay on their side of the exhibit, and as we move around, they'll move to the opposite side from where we are.
Kristen wants to know, do they ever fight?
I have not seen them fight. They have their social kind of hierarchy, and it's a way of them to avoid fighting amongst themselves. So it's not like, you know, Waya, who's the low man on the totem pole, is going to try and challenge somebody and say, hey man, I want that oxtail. He's just going to hang out and wait until, you know, his brothers are done, and then he gets what's left over.
Karsten asks, how long do they live?
In the wild, they'll live maybe 8 to 10 years. In captivity, they typically will live maybe like 10 to 12, maybe a little bit older. Our female that we just lost back in the fall, she was actually exceptionally old, and she lived to be 17 and a half. So she wasn't quite the record oldest, but that's pretty far up there.
Maddie wants to know, do they have good eyesight?
They do have good eyesight. Eyesight and their sense of smell is the main ways that they find their prey out in the wild.
Quinley asks, are they nocturnal?
They're not nocturnal. That's a good question, and I'm not 100% sure what you would consider them. Do you have any idea? I'll have to look that one up.
Averly wants to know, do they like water? Do they swim?
Well, as you can see down here, if we haven't filled up the pool yet, so I don't know about these guys in particular. And I'm not sure in the wild. I haven't read anything about, you know, whether they do or don't swim in the water. I know they will, if they have to, get across the stream, but I don't know if they'll seek it out and play in it.
Grayson asked how many babies they have at a time.
They can have up to 4 to 7, but usually it's more around like 3 or 4 is the most common amount.
Kathy had a good question about how do they establish the hierarchy?
That is a good question.
Is it due to one being larger?
And you know what? I'm honestly not sure how they do establish it.
I think it's challenging and fighting a little bit. And I only say that because when we had our 2 previous females, we would see in spring a little bit of a dominance battle. It was always the same winner, but I mean there was often a little scuffle. So it's probably just some infighting.
Walker asked how many are left in the wild.
They don't know 100% for sure. The census last year for 2019, they had a census of 163, but obviously, you know, there could be more than how many they counted. It's not like they're going to be able to find every single wolf out in the wild. And that was actually just, I believe, just in the United States area, so I don't know as far as in Mexico how many there are down there.
Laura asked, is their fur soft or is it coarse?
I'm trying to think if I touched them the last time we had them. Like when they've been under anesthesia for procedures, I would say probably soft. I know they have a soft undercoat in the wintertime that they'll probably start shedding out soon, but I know like the outer guard hairs will be more coarse. They're not friendly enough for us to go pet, unfortunately.
Dina asked, do they eat berries and plants or just meat?
They will pretty much just eat meat.
Ellie wants to know, do they ever get haircuts? Do you have to groom them?
I would like to see somebody do that. No, they don't get haircuts. Starting in the spring, probably any day now, they'll start what we call blowing their coats, and you can walk by this exhibit and there will be just like big poofs and piles of hair when they really start shedding out their winter coats. So they'll shed it out into a thinner coat for the summertime, and then they'll grow back their thick winter coat later on in the fall. So we don't need to cut their hair.
Ainsley asked, how do they communicate with each other?
They can communicate through scent marking, and if it's over a long distance, they'll communicate with howls back and forth amongst the pack.
Liam asked, do they make good pets?
They would not make good pets. I mean, even if you had a little one that you raised up from a baby, they still just got too much of that wild nature in them, and they just wouldn't make good pets. They'd be too unpredictable.
And everybody's favorite question is, who is their favorite keeper?
I don't know that they have a favorite keeper. These guys, they're a little more wary than our other Mexican wolves were, and so they don't really want to engage with us, so there's not a way to tell who they might like the best.
And the last question from Maddie is, are they smart like dogs?
They are smart. They'll watch and learn, and they can figure things out. Since these are potentially releasable animals, we aren't going to do any training with them because we don't want them to be too used to humans and too imprinted on them with, direct contact like that. But, for anything they need to learn to survive in the wild, they're very smart. All right, well, that's it for our home safari for today. I'm glad you could tune in and meet our Mexican wolves, and hopefully soon we'll see you back here at the zoo and you can see these guys in person. And if you come on a not rainy day, then they'll be a lot cleaner. We do have a craft for you to do if you go on the website. We've got a paper chain to make to do sort of the chain of life. Like I mentioned, these guys are the top predators, and you can put your chain of life together for the chain going down from the predator to the prey, to what the prey eats and what that might eat. So do that and share it with us on Facebook or anything else.